Welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. I have a problem, and the problem is actually this video, the topic of the video. So this is either a 1 hour, 2 hour, multi-segment video, or it's a 30-second video. That's kind of a hard one to figure out. There's not a lot of in between. Guess what? The last year, the so-called pandemic, the lockdowns, has resulted in the largest transfer of wealth and power in all of human history. Ta-da! End of video. There's so much to think about with this. There's so much that is reported. You know, you go to start looking at the reporting for this, and they start talking about generational wealth transfer. You know, oh, all the people are dying. Well, actually, no. We haven't seen a lot of people dying. The news will tell you that 500,000, 580,000, whatever, people have died of coronavirus, but the death rate, the overall mortality rate in the United States isn't really much, if any, higher than a normal year. So it's not true that lots and lots and lots of people are dying. And it's not like we've lost, 3 million extra boomers. That's the generation, not the epithet, who have transferred $5 billion to their kids or some other unfair, horrible, rich scheme that we need to tax. The media will tell you that. The media. Remember that the media, 96 or 98% now, it grows. It used to be a little less. The media is owned by fewer than a dozen of the richest and most powerful people or corporation controlled by those people on the planet. Think about that for a minute. Think about what they tell you and what that actually means. Do they tell you the truth? I don't know. I mean, look at Texas. Texas took the masks off. Oh, we got to have the ritual, accusations of Republican baby killers, blah, blah, blah. And then in 2 weeks, everyone else is going to take their masks off. And they're going to totally forget that they blame Texas. As soon as it becomes untenable to maintain that part of the narrative, it'll go away. But the only reason it hasn't gone away yet, because we know it's untenable, is that you have to have the couple weeks of ritual, demonizing of people in Texas. Specifically, Republicans. All right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the wealth transfer, because Texas is honestly kind of boring. I've been there way too many times. It's a horrible state. The largest transfer of wealth and power in human history. This even eclipses the early Obama era. Okay, we had a recovery. No one actually came up with a name for that. We have names for different economic recoveries after a recession. We have the K shape and the V shape and the W shape, and they all have different meanings, And one of the things that happens is certain types of recessions, usually this is where you've got the V's and the W's, have a agility response, okay? The old dead businesses that can't adapt to the modern world die off, and that's not what happened on this one. It's interesting because it's not even what happened with the Obama era. There was a V-shaped recovery pattern, but it wasn't a V-shaped economic recovery. And that's kind of interesting. This is the first time where the large corporations, the larger, bigger businesses, have had no negative and almost exclusively positive impacts of a recession. I want you to think about that for a moment. Okay, recessions, everything kind of goes down a little bit, right? People scramble around and then new people come to the top. To some extent, there's always a little bit of that V. There's always a little bit of that changeover, okay? That's fine. What happened this time isn't that. big business got bigger. Large corporations got larger. What got hammered was, to put it in the words of one of the reporters, the 90%. Okay, so one of the reports says that trillions and trillions of dollars, and they're not joking, have been taken from the bottom 90% and given to the top 1%. There's a lot of truth to that, but the portrayal is bad, okay? That bottom 90%, the lower 90%, people write these articles continuously with the idea of trying to convince you that we're talking about, the ghetto poor, all right? And that's the bottom 5%, okay? Depending on your nation, it could be the bottom 10%. If you're in France, maybe even the bottom 20%. France has lots and lots of block housing for certain populations. But in America, that's the bottom 5%. The majority of that bottom 9% is the middle class or former middle class. So that's a really important thing to remember. What happened was the middle class got robbed, raped, boned, abused, and it was done in a very systematic fashion. Now, I've mentioned before the fairly obvious fact that small business owners, entrepreneurs, independent workers tend to be more fiscally conservative, and they end up tending to be at least a little bit more Republican leaning as independents because of policy, because they don't want to lose all of their money to taxes when they don't make that much money, and so on and so forth. Okay, there's, I make the comment that they know how the world works, they know how to deal with reality, they know, hey, if I want to make the money, I have to go open my damn store. So there's a cause and effect relationship, and that tends to make them less liberal especially in the progressive modern sense, which is completely disconnected between production and wealth. So when you negatively impact, destroy that middle class, that business class, entrepreneurs, small businesses, what you're doing is you're robbing your political opponents, Republicans. Basically, we're in a two-party system, of their funding. Okay, a lot of funding, the majority of funding comes from donations. When you remove small business, you remove those donations. Okay, the only thing left is government employment and large corporate employment, and that's government employment. You're looking at what, 80% liberal, 80% progressive. Well, liberal, 8% progressive. So you hamstrung, you cut off at the knees your political opposition. Now, if you don't like party systems or you don't like the Republicans, you might say, yay, that's awesome. But let's think about this for a moment, because that leaves you with a single party state. The only thing worse than a two-party system that has nationalized parties is a single party system, okay? One-party states always suck. And, I'm not going to go off into the weeds and talk about the actual difference between a two-party system and a nationalized two-party system, because there are differences and they are important, and it's not something we need to talk about a whole lot right now. So the 90% got raped, and part of that, of course, as far as I can tell, was deliberately to reduce the political power of Republicans. That's just what happened. Most of the serious lockdown movements have come from Democrats, progressives, whether in government or in media, and the whole thing where people wear masks and don't go out and stay home to save my life and you're putting me at risk, all that bullshit, right? It's all very left oriented. Now, there are absolutely a number of authoritarian Republicans who have bought into that. Okay, they're not going to deny that at all. It's not just Democrats, but if you look at it, it's mostly Democrats that have pushed the lockdowns. Now, where it isn't, you have to look at power structures. Okay, the authoritarians, the corporatists, the globalists, the transnational progressives, the people talking about big money power and big power money have pushed lockdowns hard. And we have had the largest transfer of wealth and power, political, social power, regulatory power, money, government and corporate. It's very fascist. It's all governments and corporations working together. As long as the corporations do what the governments say is right, then the corporations have no rules left, no boundaries to their behavior. Very fascist. Okay, it's one of the problems I have with the left right now is they can't even acknowledge that what they're doing is what they're doing. A couple of them do, but they refuse the word fascism. They prefer to use various other socialist words. You know, they don't want their version of socialism to be equated to former versions of socialism. 90% and the top 1%. It's not the top 1% that's actually getting it. It's the top 1/3 of 1% that's getting it. That's another thing to remember. So the whole economic shift, global poverty, everything, has been engineered at the expense of the middle class. This is where we get into hours and hours of video. The last couple of decades, we have massively reduced the global poverty level. Just insanely. You would not believe how good people have it now in terms of quality of life and stuff. Absolute abject poverty went down so much. But you wouldn't know this from the news, of course, but you also have to realize that the reason it happened so fast is because we destroyed the middle class to do it. That's actually a pretty important note. So what happens now is with the so-called pandemic, they took all of it. They took the rest of it, all of it away. Hundreds of thousands of businesses have closed and are never coming back. Small businesses. Hundreds of thousands. And all the small business jobs, they're gone. They're not coming back. They've done this to you very deliberately, very calculated fashion, it seems. And if you don't believe it's calculated, look at some states. Like right here in Nevada, we had situations where you could go to larger stores, Walmart's, Scheels, Costco, Sam's Club, Target, the larger corporate stores, the outlets, the corporate outlets, right? At the outlet mall, and there were no lines. You know, there's a capacity limit. They talk about a capacity limit. There's no lines. There's no one at the door checking. You have to wear your mask to get in the door, or someone says, "Here's a mask," right? But at the same time, smaller businesses were being restricted to 30% or 25% capacity, and they were being checked. I've watched the inspectors come through the small independent coffee shops and bookstores and game stores, all the independent smaller businesses, the bars. It got hammered. There's people in there checking you all the time, but no one checks Walmart. No one cares. It's Walmart. They have money. They're big. Everything in Nevada was targeted, very specifically targeted at small businesses. And the governor, Steve Sisolak, he doesn't he's not that dumb, you know, and you can't believe his lies. I mean, look, he's trying to honestly create an autonomous government zone run by corporations to make their own laws using their own currency. Guy is crazy. Back on topic. The biggest transfer of wealth and power in history. What does that mean? Catch me in the next video. Stay sideways.